In the annals of modern history, few figures have left a more indelible mark of destruction and infamy than Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. These two men, driven by their twisted ideologies and insatiable lust for power, plunged the world into a maelstrom of violence and suffering that would forever alter the course of human civilization. While their paths initially converged as allies in the pursuit of fascist domination, their legacies would ultimately diverge, revealing stark contrasts in their motivations, methods, and the lasting impact they had on their respective nations. But what were the fundamental differences between these two dictators? How did their ideologies and personal ambitions shape the trajectories of their regimes? And perhaps most importantly, how did their military failures and the devastation they wrought upon their own countries ultimately seal their fates? Ideological foundations. Fascism versus National Socialism. At the core of Mussolini's and Hitler's respective movements lay distinct ideological foundations that would shape their actions in the course of their regimes. Mussolini, the founder of Italian fascism, was driven by a fervent belief in the supremacy of the state and the need for a strong, centralized government to restore Italy's former glory. His ideology was rooted in a form of ultranationalism that celebrated the virtues of the Roman Empire and sought to revive Italy's status as a dominant power on the world stage. Hitler, on the other hand, espoused the tenets of National Socialism, a twisted ideology that combined elements of extreme German nationalism with a virulent strain of anti-Semitism and racial supremacy. Unlike Mussolini, whose fascist ideology was primarily focused on the glorification of the state, Hitler's vision was inextricably linked to the concept of Aryan racial superiority and the pursuit of Lebensraum, or living space, for the German people. This fundamental difference in ideological underpinnings would ultimately shape the trajectories of their respective regimes and the atrocities they committed. While Mussolini's fascist regime was undoubtedly brutal and oppressive, it lacked the genocidal fervor and systematic extermination of entire populations that characterized Hitler's Nazi regime. The pursuit of power and the path to dictatorship. Despite their ideological differences, both Mussolini and Hitler shared a common trait: an insatiable hunger for power and a willingness to employ any means necessary to achieve their goals. Mussolini's rise to power began with his infamous March on Rome in 1922, where he and his black shirt militia effectively seized control of the Italian government through a combination of intimidation and political maneuvering. Hitler, on the other hand, followed a more circuitous path to power, initially attempting to seize control through the failed beer hall putsch of 1923. Undeterred, he later exploited the economic and political turmoil of the Weimar Republic to gradually consolidate his power and establish himself as the undisputed leader of Nazi Germany. Once in power, both men wasted no time in dismantling the remnants of democracy and establishing totalitarian regimes. Mussolini's fascist dictatorship was characterized by the suppression of dissent, the indoctrination of the masses through propaganda, and the centralization of power within the fascist party. Hitler's Nazi regime, however, took these elements to an even more extreme and horrific level, implementing a system of terror, genocide, and total control over every aspect of German society. Military failures and the devastation of war. As the world plunged into the chaos of World War II, both Mussolini and Hitler found themselves embroiled in a conflict that would ultimately expose the weaknesses of their respective regimes and the folly of their military ambitions. Mussolini, driven by his desire to restore Italy's former glory, embarked on a series of ill-conceived military campaigns that would prove disastrous for his country. The invasion of Ethiopia in 1935, while initially successful, revealed the limitations of Italy's military capabilities and strained the nation's resources. Mussolini's decision to enter World War II on the side of Nazi Germany in 1940 would prove to be an even greater miscalculation, as Italy's ill-equipped and poorly trained forces suffered a string of humiliating defeats at the hands of the Allies. Hitler, on the other hand, initially enjoyed a series of stunning military victories, fueled by the might of the German war machine and the tactical brilliance of his generals. However, his hubris and unwavering belief in the superiority of the Aryan race would ultimately lead him to make a series of catastrophic strategic blunders, such as the ill-fated invasion of the Soviet Union and the declaration of war on the United States. As the tide of war turned against the Axis powers, both Mussolini and Hitler found themselves increasingly isolated and desperate. Mussolini's regime crumbled in 1943 as he was ousted from power and briefly imprisoned before being rescued by German forces and installed as the puppet leader of the Italian Social Republic. Hitler, meanwhile, clung to power with an iron grip, refusing to surrender even as the Allied forces closed in on Berlin. His unwavering commitment to the Nazi ideology and his delusional belief in a final victory led him to sacrifice countless German lives in a futile effort to prolong the war. The lasting impact and the devastation left behind. In the end, both Mussolini and Hitler left their respective nations in ruins, their dreams of fascist domination shattered by the weight of their own hubris and the resilience of the Allied forces. Mussolini's legacy in Italy was one of economic ruin, political instability, and a deep sense of national shame for the atrocities committed in the name of fascism. Hitler's impact on Germany was even more devastating. The Nazi regime's pursuit of racial supremacy and its genocidal policies resulted in the deaths of millions of innocent civilians, including the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. Germany itself was left in ruins, its cities reduced to rubble, and its once proud military machine lay in tatters. As the dust settled in the aftermath of World War II, the world was left to grapple with the horrific consequences of these two dictators' actions. The devastation they wrought upon their own countries and the suffering they inflicted upon countless innocent lives would serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the perils of extremist ideologies. In the end, the legacies of Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler stand as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the fragility of human civilization and the importance of vigilance against the forces of hatred, intolerance, and authoritarianism. Their stories serve as a powerful reminder that the pursuit of power, when unchecked by moral and ethical constraints, can lead to unimaginable suffering and destruction. As we reflect on the lives and actions of these two dictators, we are confronted with a series of profound questions. How can we prevent such atrocities from occurring again? What lessons can we learn from the failures of their regimes and the devastation they wrought upon their own nations? And perhaps most importantly, how can we cultivate a society that values human dignity, freedom, and the pursuit of peace over the destructive forces of extremism and authoritarianism? These questions, while daunting, are essential for ensuring that the sacrifices made by those who fought against the scourge of fascism and Nazism were not in vain. By studying the lives and actions of Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler, we can gain a deeper understanding of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of upholding the values of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. In the end, the legacies of these two dictators serve as a stark reminder that the path to a better future lies not in the pursuit of power and domination, but in the cultivation of empathy, compassion, and a shared commitment to the betterment of humanity. Only by learning from the mistakes of the past can we hope to build a world where the horrors of fascism and Nazism are never repeated.